Welcome to our deep dives today. We're going to be looking at excerpts from How to Be Resilient by Dr. Gail Gazelle. It seems like you're really interested in building up your resilience, and this book is chock full of great information.
Yeah, and one of the things that really struck me about this book was that Dr. Gazelle goes beyond the typical bounce back definition of resilience. We always hear about bouncing back from adversity, but she talks about resilience as an unshakable inner core that we can all tap into.
That's such a cool way to think about it. Instead of thinking about it, like you said, as bouncing back, it's almost like it's something that's already there. It's just waiting to be uncovered.
Exactly. And it's not about becoming superhuman or anything. It's really just about discovering that strength that's already within us.
Yeah, it reminds me of like those nature documentaries where you see like a tiny little plant pushing through a crack in the concrete.
hmm
It's like we all have that innate drive to thrive even when things are really tough.
I love that analogy. And the cool thing is, Dr. Gazelle doesn't just talk about this inner strength in theory. She actually shares really powerful stories from her work with patients.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
She talks about people facing like unimaginable hardship, like terminal illnesses. And even in those situations, she saw how some individuals found ways to navigate their circumstances with incredible grace and even purpose.
Wow. So she's seen it firsthand.
Exactly. And it really highlights that potential we all have to tap into that inner resilience no matter what life throws our way.
So it really is like a muscle we can all strengthen.
I think that's a great way to put it. And to help us do that, she provides this framework of 6 pillars of resilience.
Oh, cool. I love frameworks. Lay it on me.
They are connection, flexibility, perseverance, self-regulation, positivity, and self-care.
Okay. So 6 key ingredients to building up that inner strength.
You got it. And we'll dive into each one, but I'm curious, where do you want to start?
Let's start with connection, because I think that one's pretty intuitive. We all know relationships are important, but what's Dr. Gazelle's specific take on it?
One thing she emphasizes is the importance of what she calls micro moments of connection.
Okay.
So it's not just about having, a few really close friends or family members. It's about recognizing that even small interactions can have a big impact on our well-being.
Like just chatting with the barista at the coffee shop or...
Exactly. Or like smiling at a stranger on the street.
Yeah, those little moments where you feel seen, you know, even if it's just for a second. It can really brighten your day.
And there's actually science behind this. These little interactions trigger the release of oxytocin, which is a hormone that helps reduce stress and promotes those feelings of connection and trust.
Wow. So it's like those little moments are actually making deposits in our resilience bank.
That's a great way to think about it. It's like they're helping us feel more supported and less alone when we face challenges.
That's fascinating. Makes you want to pay more attention to those little moments throughout the day.
Right. It's like a reminder that connection is available everywhere. We just have to be open to it. And speaking of being open, that leads us to the next pillar, flexibility.
Ooh, I like where this is going. How does she connect those two?
She uses this really powerful analogy to illustrate the importance of flexibility. She talks about the 2 arrows.
Okay.
The first arrow represents the difficult event itself, like maybe a job loss or a health issue.
Right, the thing that knocks us down.
Exactly. But it's the second arrow, our reaction to the event, that often causes the most suffering.
It's like we get hit by that initial blow, and then we shoot ourselves with a second arrow of negativity and self-criticism.
Precisely. And she suggests that cultivating flexibility, particularly through mindfulness, can help us soften the impact of that second arrow.
Mindfulness. That's something you hear a lot about these days. What's her specific take on it?
Well, she presents mindfulness as a way to train our attention and become more aware of our thoughts and feelings without judgment. And she actually includes specific mindfulness exercises in the book. One that I thought was interesting is called the open sky meditation.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. It's where you basically imagine your thoughts as like passing clouds. You just observe them as they drift by without getting caught up in them.
That sounds like a really helpful practice, especially when you feel like your thoughts are racing a million miles an hour and you're just spiraling.
It is. It's a great way to just create some space between ourselves and our reactions and to respond to those challenges with more clarity and intention. And speaking of intention, that brings us to the next pillar, perseverance.
Okay, perseverance. This is the one I think a lot of people struggle with. What's Dr. Gazelle's secret sauce for staying the course, especially when things get tough?
Well, one thing she does is she challenges that common belief that success hinges solely on talent and intelligence. That some people are just born with it. Instead, she introduces this concept of grit. which she defines as passion and perseverance for long-term goals.
It's like having that fire in your belly, that drive to keep going even when you hit roadblocks.
Exactly. And she really emphasizes the importance of connecting with your why, that deep purpose that fuels your motivation. And to illustrate this, she shares some really inspiring stories of individuals who achieve some pretty incredible things.
Oh, wow. Like what?
Well, she talks about one person who overcame a serious illness to become a world-class athlete, and another who built a successful business from scratch despite facing numerous setbacks.
So not just people who are naturally gifted.
Not at all. These are people who just had this incredible drive and commitment to their goals.
That's so inspiring. It makes you want to really think about what truly lights you up, what's worth fighting for.
Exactly. It's about uncovering that inner purpose that gives you that strength to keep going even when things get tough.
And I'm guessing Dr. Gazelle provides some tools for doing just that.
She does. She offers a lot of practical exercises in the book. One that I thought was particularly interesting is called Meet Your Future Self.
Ooh, tell me more.
It's where you basically visualize yourself in the future having already achieved your goals.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's about tapping into the wisdom and guidance that your future self can offer and using that to stay motivated in the present. So it's like getting a pep talk from your wisest self.
I love that. It's like getting a glimpse of what's possible and then using that to fuel your actions today.
Exactly. And it's a great way to tap into that inner knowing and trust that you have what it takes to achieve your goal.
Okay, I'm definitely going to have to check that out. And I think we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive.
We have. We've explored the idea of resilience as this inner strength, and we've delved into those first three pillars: connection, flexibility, and perseverance. But there's still so much more to unpack. Are you ready to continue our journey?
Absolutely. Let's
Yeah.
dive into the rest of those pillars in part 2.
Welcome back to our deep dive into resilience. We left off talking about the first three pillars of Dr. Gazelle's framework, and now we're moving into the realm of managing our inner world with self-regulation.
Okay, self-regulation. That sounds pretty crucial, especially in today's world where it feels like we're constantly bombarded with information and stimulation.
It is, and Dr. Gazelle really emphasizes that emotions, even the difficult ones, are a natural part of the human experience.
So it's not about trying to suppress or ignore them.
Exactly. It's more about learning to acknowledge and work with them skillfully, kind of like riding a wave. You don't want to fight against it. You want to learn to flow with it.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like if you try to hold a beach ball underwater, it's just going to pop up eventually,
Yeah.
often with even more force.
Exactly. And she actually delves into the science behind this. You know how our nervous system is wired for survival? It triggers that fight, flight, or freeze response when we perceive a threat.
Right, like our caveman instincts.
Exactly. But the tricky part is that in our modern world, those responses often get activated even when we're not facing actual physical danger.
So when I'm freaking out about a deadline or a presentation, my body is reacting as if I'm facing a saber-toothed tiger.
In a way, yes. Your body is flooded with those same stress hormones preparing you to fight or flee. The problem is those responses aren't always so helpful in our modern-day situations.
So how do we manage those intense emotions? Dr. Gazelle must give some strategies for navigating those moments when we feel totally hijacked by our feelings.
She does. She introduces this technique called the SAM&PAM technique, which is a really simple but effective way to interrupt those emotional hijackings.
Okay, tell me more.
Basically, it involves 4 steps.
Okay.
First, you stop what you're doing. Then you take a few deep breaths. Then you observe your thoughts and feelings without judgment, and then you proceed with more awareness and intention.
So it's like a mini meditation you can do anywhere, anytime.
Exactly. It's about hitting that pause button and giving yourself a chance to respond rather than just react.
I like it. Do you think this works for all types of emotions?
She dives into some specific techniques for managing different emotions like anger, fear, and sadness. For instance, with anger, she talks about the importance of cooling down before reacting.
So taking that time to process before you say or do something you might regret.
Exactly. And she encourages us to challenge those one-sided conversations we often have in our heads, where we're just rehearsing all the ways we've been wronged.
Oh yeah, I know those conversations well.
Instead, she suggests focusing on calming our own flames, recognizing that holding on to anger really only hurts us in the long run.
That's a good point. And she talks about fear too, right? That can be such a paralyzing emotion.
She does. She encourages us to reach out for support and connection when we're feeling afraid. Reminding us that vulnerability and compassion are actually antidotes to fear. And she also talks about the importance of understanding the root of our fears.
Oh, interesting. So getting curious about where those fears are coming from.
Exactly. Sometimes just naming the fear and investigating where it comes from can really diminish its power.
It's like that saying, fear stands for false evidence appearing real. When we shine a light on those fears, they often lose their grip on us.
That's a great way to put it. And she emphasizes that emotions, even fear, are temporary. They come and go like waves.
We just have to ride them out.
Exactly. She even introduces a practice called the RAIN practice, which helps us recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture our emotions with self-compassion.
Okay, wow. That's a lot packed into one little acronym.
It is. It's a really powerful tool. And it can actually be used to cultivate more positive emotions, which brings us to our next pillar, positivity.
Okay, positivity. This is an interesting one because I think a lot of people are skeptical about the power of positivity, especially when they're going through tough times.
I get that. It can feel almost forced or inauthentic when you're struggling. But Dr. Gazelle actually makes a really compelling case for the benefits of cultivating a positive mindset. She draws on research from the field of positive psychology to show how positive emotions can actually broaden our thinking, help us see more possibilities, and boost our resourcefulness.
So it's not about denying or dismissing the negative. It's more about balancing it out with an awareness of what's going well.
Exactly. It's like filling up your resilience well with those positive emotions so you have more to draw on when challenges arise.
Right.
But it's not always easy. Our brains are actually wired for negativity.
Really? Why is that?
It's called the negativity bias. Our brains are kind of like Velcro for negative experiences and Teflon for positive ones.
Mm.
It's an evolutionary thing. It helped our ancestors survive by being super alert to potential threats.
So we're basically fighting against our own biology here.
In a way, yes. But the good news is we can train our brains to be more positive. And one of the most powerful tools for doing that is gratitude.
Gratitude. It's a word you hear a lot these days.
Yeah.
What's unique about Dr. Gazelle's approach to gratitude?
Well, she shares these really compelling stories about how practicing gratitude literally transformed people's lives. She talks about one woman named Monica who was struggling to find a job, and she was just feeling so overwhelmed by negativity.
Oh, wow. I've been there.
Right. It's tough. And her career counselor encouraged her to start a daily gratitude practice, just writing down a few things she was thankful for each day.
And did it work?
It did. Over time, Monica's whole mindset shifted. She started to feel more optimistic and confident, and she actually ended up landing a job she loved.
That's awesome.
It is. And Dr. Gazelle explains that gratitude actually rewires our brains. It makes us more receptive to those positive experiences. It's like instead of focusing on what's missing, we're training our brains to appreciate what we already have.
I love that. It's like shifting our focus from scarcity to abundance.
Exactly. And she offers some other strategies for boosting positivity, too, like challenging negative thoughts, silencing that inner critic, and cultivating a more optimistic outlook.
Yeah, that inner critic can be a real drag.
Mm-hmm.
How does she suggest we deal with that voice?
She encourages us to treat that inner critic with the same kindness and compassion that we would offer a friend.
Instead of beating ourselves up.
Exactly. It's about understanding where those negative thoughts are coming from and offering ourselves some support and encouragement.
It's like that saying, you can be your own worst enemy or your own best friend.
Exactly. And when it comes to cultivating an optimistic outlook, she suggests paying attention to how we explain things to ourselves.
Like how we talk to ourselves about our experiences.
Exactly. She uses this example of getting stuck in traffic. A pessimist might think, ugh, this always happens to me. My whole day is ruined.
Been there.
But an optimist might see it as an opportunity to listen to a podcast or enjoy some quiet time. It's about choosing to see that silver lining even in challenging situations.
That's a good reframe. And I think we could all use a little more optimism in our lives.
Agreed. And she actually has this fun little exercise called Magic Monday, where you basically visualize your entire week going well, focusing on positive interactions, successful outcomes. It's about training our brains to expect good things to happen, which can actually increase our chances of success.
I love that. It's like setting the tone for a positive and productive week.
Exactly. And speaking of taking care of ourselves, that leads us perfectly into the final pillar, self-care.
Okay, self-care. This one seems pretty straightforward, but I think a lot of us struggle to actually make it a priority in our busy lives.
For sure. And Dr. Gazelle starts by debunking some common myths about self-care, like the idea that it's indulgent or selfish or that it has to be this big-time commitment.
Because it's not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She emphasizes that taking care of ourselves is essential. It's like putting on your own oxygen mask first before assisting others on an airplane.
You can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly. And she reminds us that self-care doesn't have to be elaborate or expensive. It can be as simple as taking a few minutes to enjoy a cup of tea, going for a walk in nature, or listening to your favorite music.
It's about making those small, consistent choices that nourish our mind, body, and soul.
And she shares this powerful story about a woman named Mimi who overcame a really challenging childhood and a history of mental illness by prioritizing self-care.
Wow, what does she do?
Well, she really committed to nurturing her well-being. She sought therapy, found medication that worked for her, and made time for activities that brought her joy. And through that process, she was able to heal and build a fulfilling life.
That's incredible. It's like her story is a testament to the transformative power of self-care.
It is. And to help us create our own self-care plans, Dr. Gazelle actually provides this helpful exercise where you identify activities that replenish your energy versus those that drain it.
It's like becoming a scientist of your own well-being.
Exactly. And she emphasizes the importance of self-compassion, which kind of ties back to challenging that inner critic we talked about earlier.
Right? So it's about extending that same kindness and understanding to ourselves, acknowledging our imperfections without judgment, and recognizing that we're all doing the best we can.
And she even provides a specific technique for cultivating self-compassion. It's called the self-compassion break, where you basically pause and offer yourself words of comfort and support just as you would to a friend who is struggling.
I like that. That's a great tool for those moments when we're feeling overwhelmed or self-critical.
It is. And remember, self-care isn't a one-time fix. It's an ongoing practice. It's a commitment to nurturing our well-being on a regular basis.
So how do we make self-care a habit?
Well, she offers some practical tips like scheduling me time into your calendar, creating little mini rituals, and setting achievable goals. And she also talks about the importance of considering technology breaks, recognizing that our devices can often be a source of distraction and stress.
That's a good point. It's like we need to create boundaries with technology so that it serves us rather than the other way around.
Exactly. So we've covered so much ground in this deep dive. What are your thoughts on Dr. Gazelle's 6 pillars of resilience? What's resonating with you the most?
Yeah, it really is empowering to think of resilience as something we can actively develop. Not just something some people are born with.
And what I find really cool is how all these different pillars actually work together to make each other stronger.
Right? Like when we nurture our connections, we feel more supported, which can help us, power through those tough times.
Yeah, and when we practice mindfulness and self-regulation, we're better able to handle those curveballs life throws our way.
Exactly. It's like they all fit together to create this upward spiral of well-being.
Exactly. And it all comes back to that idea that Dr. Gazelle talks about. Resilience isn't about being superhuman or never struggling. It's about having those inner and outer resources to navigate the challenges.
Speaking of resources, she seems to emphasize mindfulness as a key ingredient for resilience.
Oh, absolutely. She talks about mindfulness as this foundation.
Yeah.
It helps us stay present to really notice our thoughts and feelings without judging them. And it helps us connect with our inner wisdom.
Yeah, it's like mindfulness creates that solid ground that we need to weather any storm.
Exactly. And it reminds us that we always have a choice in how we respond to those challenges.
Even when it feels like everything's out of control.
Exactly. And she also talks about the importance of embracing change, recognizing that everything is impermanent and letting go of that illusion that we're in control of everything.
It's like that shift in perspective can free us from so much suffering.
Absolutely. And I think one of the most important things she emphasizes is treating ourselves with compassion.
Yeah, that's so important, especially when we're going through tough times. It's so easy to beat ourselves up.
Yeah, and that's when we need that self-compassion the most, recognizing that we're all doing the best we can with what we have in this moment.
I love that.
Yeah.
And it allows us to, learn from our mistakes and move forward.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious, what's your biggest takeaway from all this? What resonated with you?
What really stood out to me is that resilience is a journey. It's not like a one and done thing. It's an ongoing process of learning and growing.
I love that. It's like giving ourselves permission to, make mistakes and learn from them.
Yeah, and recognizing that we're not alone in this journey.
We all have that inner strength that we can tap into, and we have all these amazing tools and practices that Dr. Gazelle has shared with us.
Exactly. And it really is hopeful. It's like she's saying, hey, life is going to be challenging, but you have the strength to get through it and come out even stronger on the other side.
Absolutely. And she doesn't just give us a pep talk. She gives us concrete steps we can take.
Exactly. So as we close out this deep dive, I want to leave everyone with this question. What's one small step you can take today to start building your own resilience? Maybe it's reaching out to a friend, scheduling some time for yourself, or just offering yourself a little bit of compassion.
Whatever it is, take that step. Embrace this journey and see what you discover.
You might be amazed by the strength you find within yourself. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into resilience.